Welcome to the GrayHawk DJC podcast. In today's podcast, we speak with Borracho Aven Axl, a professional wrestler based in Dallas, Fort Worth. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks for joining us. I think this is going to be one of the most interesting podcasts we've ever had. You are a professional wrestler by trade,
yes, sir.
Right?
By trade.
That is awesome. So let's take you way back. So tell us about where you came from, how you grew up, and then we'll get into the wrestling part of it, I guess.
Cool, right on. I grew up in a small place 9 hours south of the DFW called Laguna Vista. It's close to Matamoros, Mexico, Matamoros. Grew up there about the first 20 years of my life, I guess. So that whole time, it's small town stuff, no internet. So we're all just trying to find something to do. And a big group of us ended up just finding like a big patch of land and like trees that formed like a Thunderdome. And when you're like 13 and you see trees make a circle, I just ended up making like a small time fed. That's what I saw. I saw an arena. Okay. So right off the bat, I had like the business mindset of I can do something here and I can charge the kids at school and get this going. Because where I had come up from, it's like, it was little to no money. Mm-hmm. It was like McDonald's wasn't even an option at the time. It was like, we got McDonald's at the house type deal. My mom would always say that. I was like, can I get McDonald's? Oh, we got McDonald's at the house.
How big's your town?
Let's see. I think Laguna Vista at one point when I lived there was like less than 1,000 people. Okay. Something like that. And then on top of that, we're pretty secluded from everything else. So I think the closest thing to like a big city society type thing would probably have been like 45 minutes away, which is like McAllen, Texas. Okay. And they finally have like a kind of arena type thing now. Okay. But yeah, ever since I was young, I grew up kind of on the poorer side, and then I've loved wrestling forever.
When did you first get into it, you think?
My grandma introduced me to it, actually. She was a big fan of wrestling, like big time of old school wrestling. She liked like 1, 2, 3 Kid through WWE, but before that we watched WCW and NWA, and I was raised on it with them, and it always just like captivated me and captured my imagination.
Right. Who was your wrestler, I guess, at the time?
When I was a younger kid, I loved Undertaker a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's the theatrics, you know what I mean? And he was just really cool to look at. And as I got older, Terry Funk and Stone Cold really stuck to me like a whole lot. Up to now, like I still love Terry Funk to no end. He's one of my biggest influences, and so is Steve Austin. But I think, I would say those are probably my guys for sure. So
you found this little patch of land, and then what did y'all do next?
So we did that, and a couple of my friends, we got together. We were like, dude, let's do like a wrestling thing and see if we can get guys to pay like $1 or $2 to come and see it. So we started planning, and we have, of course, no idea how it works. We're not professionals at all. We're just kids. Right. But we were like, if we can get 30 people here, we can make a little bit of money. We can go buy some McDonald's and maybe a video game. Sure. And sure enough, it happened. It was like 4 or 5 of us got together. I remember the matches still. It was pretty funny. It was a triple threat that I was in, and then like a one-on-one. And it was like ECW-esque weapons and all that. And kids actually showed up. Sure. And like that was the encouraging thing. How'd you
get the word out?
Through school, into school, like in school. Like we had told our friends to tell people and so on and so forth to get people interested. But and at that point, nobody knows what's up with wrestling either. You know what I mean? So people just think they're going to come watch school fights. Right. And that's what we implied to everybody to draw them in. That's awesome. That's the interesting thing. It's like, because within the school dynamic, there was already like personalities and what students thought they saw students as. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what if we just play to that? And like, there's already everybody's personalities. Sure. And that's how we developed it. And then it just became like, this guy's going to fight this guy. And then all these 3 guys are going to fight each other. And the kids showed up. And I think I remember correctly, we made like $45 or $50. We split it, bought pizza. The garage became the entranceway. So we had a boombox, played the song. The garage came up and we came out, and like the kids were hyped.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I think from then on, I was just hooked. I was like, why would I do anything else? Right. Like, if I'm 13 and I can do this now, I think I can do this later. Sure. So that was the plan. And then I got to being 21, and in the in-between space, I had picked up MMA. Mm-hmm. and actual Greco-Roman wrestling, because I figured I should know foundations.
Right.
And then I got into the Marine Corps at 21, continued my MMA through there, into Pancrase. And then when you're in the military, it's difficult to try, especially when you're full-time military, it's difficult to try and find a hobby that's takes a toll on the body, because you're already doing that at work, especially when you're infantry. You're already wearing everything down. So I figured I'll just write it out and continue afterwards. So then that was the plan.
When did you join the military? How old were you?
21.
Okay.
Yeah, United States Marine Corps. I had to wait to get into my school because they were like, "What do you want to do?"
Right.
I wanted to do infantry, and like even then, it was post 9/11, but still they were not even encouraging kids to want to go infantry. They're like, "Oh, you could be a tank mechanic," and I was like, "I could be a mechanic here."
Sure.
I wanted to go over there and help out in a real way,
Right.
and get that real like adrenaline jump. And then it happened, and I did Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't regret it. I'd do it all over again if I could.
Actual combat?
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Oh, wow.
In both Iraq and Afghanistan, more so in Afghanistan for sure.
Right.
But I still have friends I talk to this day that I love and adore. So I do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Right.
And then right when I got out, I went to UTI, which is not just a condition; it's an actual school. It's a Universal Technical Institute.
Okay.
It's a mechanics school.
Sure.
And I
just got that, by the way. All right. It took me a while.
I wasn't ready for like an academic program. I knew mechanics more or less. So then I was
So wrestling's not on your mind right now.
At that point, right. It is, but I also understand the fact that there's no way in at that point coming out of the military. You know what I mean? Okay. I still have to pay bills. I still got to get by.
How old are you? How long were you in the military for?
I was in there for 4 years. Okay. So by this point, I'm 25, 26, which even now they would consider you being pretty old getting into pro wrestling.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. When do wrestlers usually join then?
You got guys like Rey Mysterio. I think he started when he was like 13, 14, maybe even younger than that, rolling around with his uncles and all that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, It depends. But genuinely, you want to start off the younger, the better. Is always the goal. So I was doing that, and then I went to a Hot Topic store to return a gift that someone had given me. It was a wrestling tee, ironically enough, and it just didn't fit. So I went to return it. And Booker T, who's like a wrestling legend through WCW and WWE, and had a student by the name of Brian Keith, and he was working there at the time, but I didn't know who he was. I had just moved to Houston to go to school. And I had this shirt, and I was waiting to turn it in or return it or whatever. And he had caught me, and he was like, "Hey, man, you like wrestling?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Hey, well, there's schools here, there's schools there." And I was like, it sounds like an expensive way to get in.
Right.
And sure enough, there was an alternate way to get in, because he had told me there's a group of lucha guys that practice at an indoor flea market. He's like, "If you want to start, that's a cool place to start." Okay. I was like, right on. And ironically, right when my class was over, 30 minutes later, boom, that's when wrestling class had started. And it was like 3 blocks down from my school. So I could just carry my bag, go right over.
So you just showed up one day? And
that's literally what he told me to do. Yeah. He was just like, just show up.
Okay. And so take us through that day. What happened, I guess?
Man, I was nervous. Okay. I remember, because I was like, this is it. This is like my foot in the door. And especially not knowing what kind of wrestling or anything, like not knowing anything about the business, to go in pretty raw and be like, "I'm here." So I did. I got down from my car. I looked at the flea market. I remember being nervous. I was like, never been so nervous in my life just to get into a flea market. And I as soon as I walked through the doors, you can hear the clack, 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 clack of the ring all the way from and I'm like, this flea market is huge. It's not even standing anymore.
What's it called again?
It was called the Armadillo in Houston.
Okay. Is it still there?
No, it's torn down.
Right.
It's torn down. As a matter of fact, I had a really fond memory with another really good professional wrestler by the name of Gino Medina, and we had just talked about it on Sunday, how much we missed that place, because it brought us all so many memories. There's so many guys that came out of there in Texas that are great. And I just remember getting closer to the sounds and getting nervous and more nervous and more nervous. And the good thing is, all the guys were nice. They were all the nicest luchadors you could ever ask for. Okay. They tried to come off really like intimidating, But lucha guys are usually like 5'4". So I was like, well, I just came back from like the Marine Corps, from combat. I was like, it's kind of hard for me to feel intimidated, for lack of a better term. But I appreciated all the information they'd given me, and they were like, all right, come back next week, same time, bring knee pads and some athletic gear and shoes. And
so this is a common thing for them to see guys try to join them? I
don't think it's common. I think what it was at the time at least, is it was more of who was willing to step in. And then once you did step in, it becomes a test.
Okay.
It's like 2 months of grueling tests, straight up from them. And then you have guest trainers that also come in that put you through the grind, because what they really want to do is weed you out.
Right.
And if you can't take those first 3 to 4 to 5 or even 6 months, then they don't want you there, because they want to test you to see what you can put up with and what your limitations are. And they want to make sure you can go pretty far, because that reflects your, what's the word to put it? Like it reflects your fighting spirit in the ring, to see how far you'll go and what you can do physically in the ring. So that's what it became. It was just a grind for a long time. And
so you're literally finishing school, and then you're packing up and going to this wrestling class.
Oh yeah. Okay. I did that even after I'd graduated the school. I kept going for a while.
Okay.
And
are they charging you anything, or is this just you just show up and practice for free? Or
no, I paid at the beginning. I can't even remember how much it was. I think I'd paid somewhere like, I got somewhere close to like $1,100, $1,200, something like that. But it eventually became, they saw that I showed up. I was one of the few guys that continued to show up, because as long as I was there, I would see other guys come through.
Right.
It'd be like 2 or 3 weeks they were there, then we'd never see them again.
Right.
And then it would become more of a thing of also like, okay, well, we're going to be here. We need you to show up to put up the ring. So it was just me putting up the ring, setting up the venue for the longest time, and then baby steps from there.
Okay.
And
what's that training like then? What do they make you do? Like
it's a lot of agility, athleticism, and the strength training is more based, like it's more supposed to be on your own time, because everything else that's in ring, like nobody's taking weights into the ring. It's weight training, like body weight training, but outside of that, it's not much weight training. It's more flexibility, athleticism, and your ability to listen and learn. And boom, that's it. That whole time. If they see you lack any of those qualities, it's pretty much you're out the door.
But did you know the moves before you even
Nothing.
did this?
I knew nothing.
You knew nothing.
Yeah, okay. I mean, what I did know was all the like TV stuff that, what we had done in our yards when we were kids.
Right.
And to this day, I'm pretty sure like 3/4 of those guys don't know about any of that stuff I did as a kid. There's a very select few guys I would let know as I was training there, like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I was a backyard or two and all this other stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
Some of us would connect through that, because there are other guys out there who just kind of end up doing that because you love it as a kid and it becomes what it is.
Sure.
So
they're teaching you all the techniques that you need to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And especially this first incarnation of me getting into the business is lucha libre, which is traditional Mexican wrestling.
Right.
And in that form, it's athleticism over violence. So everything is delivered with grandeur and presentation, and it's precise. It's very pretty, and that one was really hard. That was really difficult for me to adapt to, because
the presentation part of it,
the movements, because it becomes more like a style of a violent ballet, because it's doing moves almost like if you were to make. I don't know if you practice any martial arts, but the best basic way I could put it, it's like putting judo and aikido into like ballet and trying to make it all work. It's super, it's different. It's a different type of sport. And for me, coming from a background of like MMA and wrestling, it's the opposite of what I was taught. It was all the opposite. It's hold your ground. It's when you're on the ground, try and take them over. Don't let them get on top of you. It's about position. And then it was basically the polar opposite in lucha libre, and that it was very hard to adapt to for myself, at least. But there's other guys that got in there and picked it up really quick. I think they just put up with me and had me there because I was showing up every week, no matter what. I would show up every event. I was putting up the ring until the point they were like, "Hey, you're going up to ref." I was like, oh,
to ref?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Out of nowhere. Just like that. Just like how I told you. That was how I found out.
Okay.
Like I had just put up the ring. I was tired. I was sweaty. And they were like, hey, man, you're up to ref. And I was like, I don't even... Oh, okay. I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Right.
So they tossed me a ref shirt from somebody else who had an extra. And they're like, okay, what's your name?
What year was this? Do you remember that day?
2000 and either, 12 or 13.
Okay. And how long have you been training for it before this first time?
Probably about a year.
Okay.
Probably about a year or 6 months. 6 months to a year.
Sure.
And then I just didn't have anything lined up because I wasn't expecting to be on that level yet, like at all. Not even on the level of just reffing a match.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the furthest thing from my mind.
Right.
It was just like trying to nail practice and that was it. Or training, whatever you want to call it. So on the spot, I didn't have a name at all. I didn't even have a gimmick because it wasn't in my own personal crosshairs, in my ego to be like, oh, I'm going to be this or whoever. You know what I mean? I just wanted to make it.
Yep.
So they're like, what's your name? And I was just like, I don't really have one. So I took my trainer's name, who was Alex Evans at the time, and I just kind of like threw the letters in the air in my head and mixed them around. And that's how I got to where I got to for the Aven Axl part of my name.
Right.
And then that just stuck and people really dug it. And it's been that ever since. I'm probably one of the fewer guys that's never had a name change or like a gimmick change. It's been stuck there ever since I started.
Okay.
And then that was all in Houston and did that for a long time. I stepped out of the game. I got married for like a year and a half and then moved back to the Valley. And that's where like all that was really going to be tested because not only was I moving back home to where I was, and out of a situation, at this point, I was leaving because I'd gone through a messy divorce and I was like homeless. So I didn't really have any money. I was living out of my expedition. So I just drove home. I had gotten fired. It was during the oil crash of like 2014, 15,
so you had a
whatever
regular day job, obviously.
At that point, yeah. Because I wasn't making any money with this yet.
Okay.
I was still trying to just really make it. And once all that happened, I ended up moving back to the Valley, trying to get myself back together. And I had a friend that said, you're just going to quit? And I was like, well, I mean, I'm in the Valley. Like, who's going to pay to see wrestlers in the Valley? Like, we have the smallest, like, it's a tiny population. And he was like, oh, you should go to Mexico. And it was my buddy, a good friend of mine who's named Lowrider. He's done stuff all over Mexico. He's an amazing, amazing wrestler. I hold him in a high regard and consider him a pretty good friend. And he's the one who advised me, like, you should go to Mexico and you should keep working.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, you're right. I should keep doing it. Like, it was, I went too far to not continue it, is how I felt also. So I went to Mexico and I was making like 500 pesos, which I think equated at the time to like, honestly, less than $5 or $6 or something like that.
Which city did you end up in?
That was in Matamoros, Mexico.
Okay.
So I had gone back there to train, and eventually I started to wrestle there.
Okay.
And for $7. It cost me $3.50 to get across the border.
Okay.
So I came back home always with like $3 or like $2.
Sure.
But
so this is per match. They give you, okay, $3 per match, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But the pay at the time wasn't like the thing that I was really aching for, because when I feel like when you're starting in any art, you just want to be exposed.
Right.
You know what I mean? And whether you're in a band or you're a rapper or you're a wrestler, I think in anything of that dynamic, you really just want to show your art to the masses. And that was kind of my mindset at the time. You know what I mean? I just wanted to do that because, I mean, I was kind of just homeless and like trying to get on my feet. I had a job and I was like, well, this is my outlet. This is what makes me happy. So this is the part of me that I'm going to keep going. And I had done that for a few years. When
you first showed up there, how did they receive you?
It was mixed.
Okay.
It was mixed for sure. Mexico's a lot harder to, for a lack of a better term, to like get yourself over with there if you're not from there.
Okay.
I kind of came in with like, I don't look like a traditional Mexican, for lack of a better term. I'm light-skinned. I have like a southern kind of accent with when I say things. So when I got in there, I really had to prove a whole lot. And I kind of knew that going in. So I had hit the gym really hard before I started to show up there. I really wanted to be fine-tuned and let them know I was serious. And they saw that. and they had started to build me up pretty quick. Okay. So I would say within like the first 6 months, I was already like main eventing there.
Oh, wow.
Which for little pay, but you're main eventing. And like the beautiful part about working in Mexico, especially at that time, before everybody had the internet on their like phones and accessible. At that point, I think it was 2015-ish, maybe. Mm-hmm. The people there love Lucha Libre locally because there is limited access to internet. They still have like internet cafes, you know, with closing hours. So when they close, like what else are you going to do? The luchas, Mexican wrestling, Lucha Libre had ran like from 8 at night to 1 in the morning sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I mean, that little, what we call arena would pack like 200, 300 people. So like we would get up on the roof and just look down in amazement of how many people showed up and packed in to this like this little man-made 3-sided walled arena with a ring in the middle. The shower didn't even have like knobs or shower heads. I'll remember that much. I remember the toilets were half broken, falling apart. There was one guy who had lived there and he cleaned the arena regularly, but we're talking about this gentleman was like 75 with one eye.
Oh my God.
Like, and you're still hearing gunshots happen right outside there, and people are getting killed. There was one training session where that happened. Someone got shot and killed outside of the arena while we were training.
Wow. Okay.
And everybody there knew that I had come from a military background. They're all staring at me, and I'm like, boss. And Traina, I was like, well, let's keep training. Like, what else are we gonna do? We can't run out.
Right.
We're safer here, and like let's be conductive. So we kept training. And I remember, I'll never forget that day because everybody just kind of stopped in their tracks, and we all kind of looked at each other.
Did you know someone in that league to ask to join the league or promotion?
Well, my friend Lowrider was the one who gave me that connection. It's called it was the Arena Universal, and it was named after a wrestler who unfortunately passed away there, who was Universal was his name, so they named it after him.
Okay. Is that still around, that promotion?
Yeah, for sure. I actually follow them on Facebook, and I know they probably, I don't know if they'll hear this or they probably don't know that I check in on them, but I do.
That's pretty cool.
I always check in on them, and because I hold them pretty close to my heart. They really taught me a lot on a moral basis of the business, like how to treat people right, how to treat you guys right, and so on and so forth. So I hold that place pretty close to my heart. And the fans too is something I really learned to adore, and how the difference of fans, like from over there to here. Over here, there's so much more spoiled. A lot of the time they can kind of care less about your physical well-being as long as you live. Right. As long as you're alive, they're okay with it.
Right.
You know, but in Mexico, it's like if something goes sideways, and even if you're what they call like a rudo, which is a bad guy or a heel, they care. Like there's a big moment of silence, and I got that's how I left over there, was with the angle with a major injury. And I was the rudo over there. I would always like mess up their good guys, take their masks. I was actually messing with light tubes over there first than anywhere I was. And I'll never forget that when I had gone written off, it was an angle that where I like broke my neck and I just kind of like stopped dead paralyzed. And my girlfriend was in the crowd, and I didn't even let her know what was going on, because I was taught like this is where you keep it. You know, it's with us here in the locker room. Nobody knows.
Right.
And it just, I'll never forget how well it worked, and that was the lesson I learned. Like as long as you keep everything internal when it comes to what's happening in the match, then everything on the outside will believe it. And that's what had happened. And it was just a really cool moment, and to see that the fans cared, like they really cared. And yeah, that was eye-opening. It was huge. So I did that for a while there.
What made you want to leave, I guess?
I got offers to start wrestling outside of the Valley more often. Okay. And I was like, at that time, I was my 3rd or 4th year really going into it. So I was starting to ramp up away from $7 fees.
You're getting more money, actually.
Yeah. Okay. I'm asking for more. I started to get up into Victoria, and then eventually to Dallas, where I started making the trips over here from 9 hours south.
They're finding you, I guess, whoever these people are.
Yeah,
right,
well,
okay.
it would be probably Lowrider who put me out there, or a friend who I was down there with, Tony Tejano, who we traveled together. So if they booked him, he was usually nice enough to be like, hey, I got this guy, you might be interested. They would send him a match or something and be like, okay, bring him too. But at that time, we're talking about like $50 to drive up 9 hours.
Right.
And then you still got to like put in for gas, and you still got to buy your food. And by the time you get home, you got $10 in your pocket.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And at this time, as green as I was, I couldn't afford merchandise or stuff like that. So I'm really just still trying to move forward. And I'm still working Mexico at the time. And the cool part about working Mexico is I was really starting to find my groove of who I was and the person I wanted to portray. And over there, after every training session, I really enjoy, one of my favorite beers is Tecate Light. And there was a store called Oxxo, O-X-X-O, in Mexico. That's kind of like their 7-Eleven, I guess, or their Stripes or whatever you want to call it. And it was right across the arena. So every time after training, people would stick around for like an hour or two just talking. So right immediately afterwards, I would just walk across and go get a couple beers and come back. And after a while, they'd be like, hey, Borracho, ¿tienes cerveza? They'd always just call me Borracho. I was like, well, I mean, that's it. I think that's it. Like, I think that works.
Right.
And it's also based on a Mexican version of bingo, basically, where it's like characters on a card, and then someone calls the character, and you put your marker on the card, and it's just like bingo. And the Borracho is a character on that card.
Okay.
So in Mexican culture, it's got significance with Latino culture with us. And I decided, like, I think that's what I'm going to run with. And I started to come out with like a flask. And then a 40 for a while is what I came out with because it was so much cheaper. It cost me $250 to come out with a 40. I was like, I could afford that. And then
so you're selling merchandise.
I started to sell merchandise out of there. Hats, kind of similar to this one. And then eventually, until I got a good design for shirts, because that's one thing that guys don't realize is it takes forever to find something that's in tune with you that other people can also get in tune with. And that's when it sells well. And you have to really honestly, that's the hardest part about pro wrestling is the money making part. Like, you could be really, really good at this and make nothing.
Right.
Like, it's almost like the skill level almost doesn't matter in comparison to your payday. Like, as long as you can figure out what the fans want, tune into that, and then you get your payday, whatever your payday may be. But on the merch side, you might make $200, $300, $400. So that alone is worth its weight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Excuse me. So I just started to tune into what I liked and who I am, instead of like trying to follow the trends of wrestling, which is the natural tendency of a lot of you guys, is to like want to follow the trends of wrestling because they think that's what promoters want and they think that's what fans want. And I've always been a huge fan of punk rock and metal and thrash, and I was like, I'll just kind of integrate all these things also, along with the Borracho stuff. And
are you always playing the heel at this time?
Mostly, yes, because everywhere I went at that point, it was to get other people over too. It was to make other people look great, and that was my job. And I didn't mind it either because I knew my place, and as long as I felt like as long as I was putting in the work, my time will come eventually. Right. So I just kept it at that. And then I had to have a real talk with my partner and be like, look, I know I'm not making a lot now, but give me like another year. And if I can triple it and I can continue that trend, this is what I want to do. I was working and there's no one that's ever known this. So it's the first. I was working insurance at the time and I looked miserable. Right. She let me know I looked miserable. She was like, every time I come in.
So that's your day job. Yeah. And you're doing this at night or weekends?
At night and weekends, that's right. And I had like the stereotypical, like a short haircut, my glasses, and I was just sitting behind a desk all day having to deal with customers. And I knew like that's not what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? And I was willing to suffer a few more years to see if this thing would all catch on to finally get out of that. And that's what happened. I just started to fine tune, and the hard part was just really trying to run with I believed what would work. Right. Because everything I believed what would work was people telling me it wouldn't.
Sure.
And I was never one to try and get into these bigger companies like AEW or WWE. It's not within my character of who I really am to want to be in those places. Like, I like to be in the locker rooms with the guys I'm around with now in a very loose environment where no one's really like checking in on you or has to tell you what to do. Like, the beautiful part about this weekend was they were like, all right, go out there and do it. That was it. There was no like orders to like specific thing for anything or to do anything. They were like, all right, this person's got to go up and you got to do whatever you do to get there. And I was like, perfect, fantastic. Thank you for the trust.
So when you go into Dallas and Victoria, what are these leagues or promotions?
Oh man, I don't even think a lot of them are around anymore. That's the thing about the independent circuit. On the indies, it's a lot of hit and miss, and you never know who's really going to stick around. Also, there's what I call like tax season promotions. They're around for tax season because that's when they get their tax money. So they run like one show, and then you never see them again. So like in the next 2 or 3 months, it's going to be like that. Like that's a good up period, and I try to ride that wave a little bit because that's a good money making.
Can you explain what the structure of the promotions look like? So you got the WWE at the top, obviously. They kind of control the whole country, right? Or do they?
Yeah, to me, it's monopolized in a sense. Like, you have the other company AEW out there, but I would put, WWE is definitely the top of the top.
And then do you have like every region has their own sub promotions and then all the way down to independent leagues?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, every region and every small town, even small towns now, have their own promotions.
How many levels is there, if you can explain that?
I don't think there's any specific amount of levels because every state, I think, in my opinion, works differently. Everywhere I've traveled by now, I've seen differences. But from what I've seen, if we're going to go by like tiers, it'd be WWE, and then AEW is pretty close to them. And then you have like Impact, MLW underneath that. And then after that, then you do start really getting into regional indie feds. And then within those regional indie feds, there's some that are really hot that have a good following. Like out of the DFW, Metroplex Wrestling has a good following. They got a great fan base that follow them every week. They're able to run every week because the fans will show up every week. And as long as that happens, then they can keep running. So to me, like that's pretty successful. And then you have other ones underneath that are maybe not so successful, and it's more like promoters with an ego just running to run, and like they draw maybe 10 people.
So it could be just some guy that says, I'm going to do a weekend wrestling thing.
That's basically all the tax season promotions. That's basically that. They find someone who has a ring, rent it out for the evening, and then they find a venue who's willing to put them up. And then they scrounge together whatever's left over for the talent. And then, boom, all of a sudden for that one day, they're a promoter and they're an indie fed.
These indie promotions, how do they tell you what to do? Like, do they just say, okay, you're the bad guy, you're the good guy, go at it? Or is there a storyline?
It really depends. Story in this day of age is hard to really get across with the patience of the modern fan. Because we live in a TikTok generation. So everything has to be in like 5 to 15 second bits so people can digest it and just digest more and more and more. And that is unfortunate for wrestling because I believe the art of wrestling should be told at a slower pace, at a stretched over time. I'd rather see Saving Private Ryan if I'm going to see something that's great and valuable than like as much as I love like Kung Fury then see Kung Fury. You know what I mean? But that's basically the dynamic now in wrestling. It's like just a bunch of stuff happening that looks cool, hyper violent or hyper athletic or hyper aerobatic, and then boom. I'd rather there be a happy medium between the two. And that's where you find it. So
as someone who's trying to get into it, how do you find these gigs, or do they come looking for you, or do you have to audition or look for them?
In today's age, it's a lot easier than what it used to be. Like, how I told you I got into it was almost like I feel, for lack of a better term, like mob style. Like, they just find out you're kind of into it, and they're like, hey, if you're really into it, go here and see if you're really about it. But nowadays, it's more like people just open schools and pay like $3,000, and regardless of how good they are, they kind of just push them through because they already paid that $3,000, and they'll get a certificate at the end of it, and then now you're a professional wrestler. Like if you're a plumber or which is nothing wrong with that. Like that's a very, very value trade. My grandfather was a plumber, but I don't believe that pro wrestling should be treated the same because we're dealing with each other's lives on such a gray area that I think it's a next level of care that has to be taught and respected over just opening a program and just paying a fee instead of paying a due.
Right.
If that makes sense. Because I ended up paying more dues than fees. But nowadays, kids are paying more fees than dues. And that creates a dynamic of a lack of respect. And it just creates a weird dynamic within pro wrestling.
Right.
And it has been a change in the last 10 years that I've been around it and in it. There definitely has been a change.
I see. All right, so you're getting your merchandise, you're going up to larger promotions. What's happening to you next after that?
At this point, I would say I'm about midway through in my career, and money is moving up.
Okay.
Now I'm coming home with like maybe enough to, if I can work the 3 or 4 times that weekend, I can cover a bill.
Right.
You know, a car note, insurance. So it's working out. And I can see it's starting to go somewhere.
Right.
But now I'm seeing that I have to tune into something further in. At this point, I'm kind of like also, for lack of a better term, generic. I have like a singlet. My hair is short. I'm still pretty baby faced. So I knew even looking at myself, I just had to be seasoned. I had to look more. I just had to be different.
Right.
And in today's age, that's what's important. And so I just started to really get into that. And I love the Misfits a whole lot. And before the Misfits design, the design that really hit was, now he's been canceled, it was, I knew the Kanye stuff, his clothing line, everybody was buying the Yeezys. And like at that point, there was the old English font stuff he was selling. And I kind of rode that wave. So I copied his merch, for lack of a better term, and just slapped my stuff on there. And it sold. Like it sold great, because people would connect it. They'd be like, "Oh, that's like the Yeezy."
So you have a secondary business almost with your merch.
It's definitely to me, like, pro wrestling in the business sense is definitely that. It's the merchandising.
Okay.
It's definitely the merchandising because I've seen guys that are great, fantastic pro wrestlers, but their pay, what they take home, doesn't reflect what they're worth, in my opinion. And you can compensate yourself just with your merch alone. So that became my strategy.
Okay.
Was trying to flip these tees that I'm getting for a pretty reasonable price into something that I can take home and kind of cushion my payday, if you will. So
you keep all the proceeds from your merchandise sales right now, right?
Yes.
There's no agent or company that helps you run it, and it's all yours.
Oh yeah, I'm total DIY, 100%, 100%. I design my own stuff, or at the very least, I pay an artist to design my idea. So what I usually do is I draw it on paper like a 10-year-old, and then I find someone who's really good at their job, like real artists who have like really good pads or virtual pads where they can modify everything pretty quick too. And then I get the vector for that. I send it to my tee guy, and my tee guy slaps it on a tee. We negotiate a deal per cost on tee, and then I tell him the batch I'm gonna end up getting it at, and boom, now we've got a deal going. And then I got to calculate how much would it make sense for me to sell this tee at a price versus how much I'm getting them for. Right.
Are you using a website or a third party?
I'm doing it all on my own. Okay. I even deliver. If you're in the DFW area, I will bring you a shirt. Like if you're in Arlington, I'll bring you a shirt. Hit me up. I mean, I'm not going to just bring it to you. Buy it and I'll bring it to you though. Sure. But it's free. It's free delivery, right? You can't even get your pizza like that anymore. So, that became my strategy, and it worked out really well. And now I have a really good relationship with my tee guy. And the next batch of merch was the Misfit style one, and that one goes really, really quick. Like I buy these batches pretty big, and they'll be gone within 2 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's even people that aren't into music like the design.
So how are they finding your stuff? I guess
it's just me putting myself out there on all my socials, on everything from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't get on TikTok, and being a part of, it's like being in a punk band without being in a punk band. It's trying to find an underground and connect with it so it connects with you. And then it becomes like this own economy, if it makes any sense. Because then you can plug yourself into with these people that go to the wrestling shows or who might even go to like the local music shows. And they can take that piece of merch to those shows also. And that was my strategy, was trying to be able to connect it to the people who I wanted to target, which was like punk rockers, metalheads, and thrashers, and be able to take my stuff to those shows also, which is cool because sometimes I'll go to a show, like we're at the Misfits show that they came by here in October, and I actually saw my shirt on a couple of people in the show. Oh, wow. And that was really cool. I was like, I was pretty mind blown by that. I marked out hard for that. That was cool. So yeah, and then once you get the merch game going, I think that's a majority of how you make your money on the indies, at least in this business, because like everybody's payday is going to fluctuate, but I mean, you can always cushion with great merch. And I mean great merch. Like it has to be really quality. People have to see you put your time and care and work into it, because I've seen some ridiculously lazy merch. Like I'm talking about like dollar plastic cups with like a sticker that they got designed slapped on there. And like, dude, people can tell this is a sticker, man. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to pay $5 for that. So, and that's another thing, trying to teach people nowadays is like how to get that out there. But like, I feel like merch is almost very secondary to everything else. When in reality, we should all on the indies be able to make a living off of this is how I see it.
So you're based in Dallas right now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When did you move up to Dallas?
That would have been 2000 and let me think back. I think either 16 or 17. It might have been early 17.
And did you come up here specifically because there's more wrestling here?
A piece of that was that. A piece of that was that for sure. A piece of it was that, and also my partner got promoted, and then it happened to work out perfectly because I knew the history that Dallas had with wrestling. And I was like, yeah, I would love to be around that. Like Dallas has amazing wrestling history, like history that the world can look at.
Right.
And I wanted to be a piece of that.
Because I'm old enough to know on Friday nights when I was like in 8th grade, I'm watching the Von Erichs.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, the Freebirds.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sportatorium.
Yeah, Sportatorium.
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
I actually have a friend that was able to wrestle in the Sportatorium on its last days, and I'm jealous that I didn't even get to see it. Like, I'm so jealous of that, man.
Yeah, those were the good days. Before, then the WWE came and just took everything over.
Yeah, and monopolized everything for sure. Right. For sure.
So if people want to see you, then where do they go to see you now then? So what's your showcase like? Yeah.
It depends. I feel like what makes me different from a lot of the other guys on the scene is my variety. A lot of the guys in the scene are kind of like one-dimensional and have a style. Okay. I have styles. Okay. I do deathmatch. Which is this last Sunday. There is a great promotion, by the way. I'm going to do a quick plug, I swear. Borracho Pro out of Austin, Texas. Fantastic. They had this event in a water park. At a water park. Okay. It was so different. I've never seen barbed wire surround a ring. So what it was a no rope barbed wire death match. Okay. So they take the ropes off, which is the propelling, I don't know what factor in the ring that causes you to run forward and shove people off of them. Take that off and they replace it all with barbed wire. And then they put fluorescent light tubes on the barbed wire. So if you hit them, you get a mini explosion kind of happening. All that was taking place within a water park. So, but I mean, on the pre-sales alone, they ended up doing like close to 100 pre-sales on the tickets.
When was this?
This Sunday.
This last Sunday. It is this Sunday.
It was this last Sunday.
Which water park was this?
It was called Beachside Billy's.
In Dallas or Austin?
That was in Austin. It's called Volente.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the Volente Beach Water Park. That's where we were by the lake.
Seriously?
Yeah, right there.
Oh, my God.
In the sand. In that sandy area, that's where they put the ring. Yeah.
Oh, my God. I didn't know they did that.
Me neither.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And like the cool thing about it, the dynamic of the fans was like we had kids, we had adults, we had everything. And there was no complaints of like, oh, this was too gory or there was too much blood. Like it was small kids coming up to me afterwards being like, that was brutal. thanks. Like, I was like, yeah, you get it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience. So that was a death match. And then there's a local promotion here. Another great one that I want to plug is called Mat War Pro. That's local in the DFW.
Okay.
They run out of Fort Worth mostly. And now we're talking about another extreme. So if Borracho Pro is going to bring you stuff, which they also do great, just traditional wrestling. Like they had Stallion Rogers from New Japan, which is a huge brand. He was there. And Gino Medina from Houston, who I mentioned earlier, who's also associated with MLW, they were the main event, and they put on a great traditional wrestling match.
Okay.
But on the other side, you have Mat War Pro here in the DFW that does strictly sports-based wrestling. Like, obey every rule. Every match starts with a tie-up. So it's more like a UFC-styled combative environment where the rules are respected. You get checked by a doc before you go in, and you get checked by a doc on the way out. And I do that also. And it's basically fighting bigger dudes is what I do there. Guys that are kind of above my punching weight is what I do in that promotion. And that one I go in with more, I guess, fighting gear. I go in with a mouthpiece because I like my teeth. And it's...
So there's more actual real fighting in that one?
Yeah, it's... Okay. Like that one, I actually won with a knee bar.
Oh, wow.
Or was it a knee bar or ankle?
Okay, so guys are actually tapping out and stuff.
Yeah, I tapped somebody out on that, and that was a good one. And then also, I'm a tag team champion at Texas, one of Texas' most legendary wrestling brands, Global Wrestling Federation, based out of DFW also. Okay. Where my tag team, Los Crudos, we won the titles and in a cage match. So yeah, I do everything in between in pro wrestling.
How many times a week are you on stage or in a ring?
It can vary. It goes from either 5 to 3 for the very, very few times in between where there's blank weekends. If there's a blank weekend, it's normally because I'm either doing something that's super important or it just slips through. But it's very few times that slips through. Okay. Especially nowadays.
And are those the 3 main promotions that you're with usually?
No, but those are so far that I could think off the top of my head, the ones that I've really enjoyed working with so far. Okay. There's definitely a whole bunch of other ones. Combat Cult out of the 956 in the Valley, which I'm going back to February 25th in a ladder match for that one. They're one of the type of promotions we were talking about that's like on a small regional level, but when you're in a smaller regional level, the goal is you're going to be able to get more fans because of that. You know what I mean? So I'm excited for that. Okay. And there's other brands. I just can't think off the top of my head right now. I'm associated with a lot. California, Best of the West. I've worked there a couple times. Colorado. And the goal is to get out there more eventually and to do states that I really want to get to Canada. Okay. That's a big goal of mine.
Is there something special about Canada?
For me personally, it's just like that's where the Hearts started. Okay. And like to me, it's a big chunk of wrestling. It's just more of a personal goal.
Okay. Have the bigger promotions ever contacted you?
No, I can't say they have. Okay. Booker T's has for like security stuff and stuff like that. But I was so dumb at the time, like that I turned it down because there wasn't a payday. That's how business oriented I was.
Do you regret that decision right
Definitely.
now?
Definitely. Okay. Oh yeah. Like I don't regret a lot, but that one I kind of do, especially because I respect the guys that are in that company a whole lot. Like I got a lot of mad love for Gino Medina, Brian Keith, and a lot of the guys there that are now breaking out and going places. So I definitely wish I would have hopped on that. And that's something I tell a lot of the younger cats too. It's like if something pops up like that and it's no pay, like you never know where it goes. Just take it.
Right. Tell us what your average day is like then. When you wake up in the morning, like what do you go through?
Wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I make a tea. Okay. I know that's weird to hear from someone like myself, but I put a little bit of ginger, honey, green tea, and I get a mix going just to get my day kind of going good. Sure. And then I'll do some cardio. I'll do a little lifting. And then I'll in-ring train twice or one time a week. Okay. But my daily routines typically tea, have 3 or 4 eggs, 1 yolk, chicken sausage, and then do some tape study, see what's going on with other promotions, see where I should be poking around, and then dive into that, come up with other designs, write songs to try and get my other project off the ground with music. And I'm really just all the time being creative and in that process, trying to make money with being creative.
Right.
That's my goal. Like when it comes to the merch, that takes up a good bit of time because I like to do stuff that nobody else does. That's my goal. I feel like that's what works, because if you could do something that's one of a kind, it's less of an excuse for someone not to buy your stuff.
Right.
Because if you have something that's similar, all they have to say is, yeah, I can just get it from this other guy some other time down the road. So
that's on a day where there's no match. So on a match day, what happens?
On a match day, it's the same kind of green tea in the morning. It usually be like a Cheerios to get some carbs in me, and then I won't eat until after the match.
When are the matches? They're at night usually, right?
Typically, okay. But like this one that I did on Sunday was at 3:30 in the afternoon, so that was nice. I got to enjoy like my day and seeing the rest of the guys work, so that was cool. So I'll do that, drink the tea, get on the road. I'll stretch out before that, of course. Get on the road and just cruise and listen to podcasts, kind of ease my mind before I get there. Try and gauge what I want to do and what it's going to be. Try and stay a step or two ahead of the event just to make sure I got my bases covered.
Okay. So when you show up to the event venue, what do you do there? Does someone greet you? Do you check in somewhere? How does that work?
The first thing I do is I shake everybody's hand. Okay. Whatever venue I'm at. Everybody who's there, the ref, the camera guy, the promoter, the guys in the back. That's always my goal, is to let everybody know who I am, shake hands, respect. And then I ask, where's the merch table at? Set up my little merch area, and then get to my match, and then figure out what I'm going to do from there for the rest of the night.
Is there a lot of pre-match prep work, like rehearsal or talking to the guys you're going to be in the ring with? Like, how does that go?
It really depends. I'm not a big fan of trying to remember a script before I get in a ring. I like to tell the story on the whim of the emotional content I'm receiving from the fans, if that makes any sense. Because there's a lot of matches where guys have this preconceived structure that they think the fans are going to dig, and half the time they'll go out there and do it, and it won't be the reception that they're thinking they're going to get. And there could be any factor. What it is psychology. You know what I mean? It can be anything. It can be either it's too hot outside or it's too cold. Right. And that automatically changes the fans' dynamic for wanting to be there. So I like to try and tune what's going to happen to them. Like it's a one-of-a-kind experience for them in that moment. And that's where I like to ride, in the moment with the crowd.
Is it, do you have to kind of communicate that with your partner or the people you're in the ring with?
It depends. Magic can be made with little to no communication. And those are like, without sounding stereotypical, that's magic. That's the real magic. That's where the trust is bonded unlike any other in a human perspective. Like you're there's two bodies trusting each other with every aspect of danger, of realistic danger. Right. You know what I mean? There's people who've died from this, who have gotten paralyzed, who've had just life-ending situations. And you're trying to ride that thin gray line as precisely as possible. So it can depend. If it's someone who's very, what we call green, new and nervous, maybe they do need the whole thing scripted, but at the same time, like, they forget most of it also. So it's that's where I like to be. That's why I say I like to just ride the wave with the crowd, and then have to communicate if I have to with the other person, right? And then try and make it make sense for the crowd that's there.
Do you think a lot of people still watch wrestling and they go, well, this is choreographed, but they don't realize the moves are actually real and can be potentially dangerous? Like,
oh yeah, I think in today's age, like, there's what we call kayfabe, which is like, but traditionally, if this were in like the 70s or 80s or maybe even the 90s, I'd probably get my ass kicked as soon as I stepped out this door for saying any of these things.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
People didn't talk about that.
No, it was gangster mentality. Like, I would have been spilling industry secrets to you. That's what it would have been like. Right. And I would have had someone who's been in for 20, 30 years just kick my ass after this. That's how it really would have been. That's like dead serious. But in this modern age, you've got internet, like, people know Bigfoot's not real. Well, most people. And I mean, that's just where we're at. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's another gray line that I try and write. I try not to just give away like everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to tell everybody how I make my movies. I just want them to see my match like a movie and to enjoy that aspect.
Absolutely. So for anybody who's trying to get into this business, any tips or advice, what would you say to them, I guess?
Get in with the sense of respect for everybody who came before you or us, because, I mean, that's the only reason it's still here. It's because there were the Funks before us. There were the Rhodes. Like, there was just so much that built a foundation for guys like me to be able to do this. And if you pay attention to the way that they did things, the formula is tried and pretty true to how to be monetarily successful. Like, I would, and I have argued that I have pretty fair monetary success compared to a lot of guys who are at the bottom level of either the two big companies. But it's also because I've done it all on my own accord. No one's told me, hey man, you got to go make more merch, or hey man, you got to go do this. It's like, no, I wake up in the mornings and try to figure out how can I make money in the next 2 or 3 weeks or the month. Where are my gaps in my bookings? Where am I not being booked? How can I get booked there? How can I expose myself to this area, to these fans, to let them know about my product, and so on and so forth. And that's what it really becomes. It's like trying to find the right demographic for your style, because nowadays what wrestling has become is like ice cream. Like, there's so many different flavors. And now you just got to find the people who want that flavor that you offer. Right. And if you can tune that in, that's where you can monetarily be successful. But in the same aspect, once you do that, you're getting into becoming a niche product, which is like deathmatch. Deathmatch is niche. I would consider it niche. There's very few times it crosses over into the mainstream, and when it does, for some reason, it doesn't work. Right. It happened on AEW when it got crossed over there, and it just didn't work out as well as they thought it was gonna. And it's because it's like, you can't put the Toxic Avenger into like mainstream theaters and expect it to make $1 billion when it's especially like the original run. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to know your demo, and you've got to tune into it. And for me personally, it's not my goal to have everybody love my ice cream. Like, that's not my goal. I have a very specific part of the wrestling demographic that I like to aim at. And it makes me a happier wrestler because I know that's the demographic that enjoys my work, instead of trying to get the whole world to love it. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get, for lack of a better term, generified. Because now they're just trying to tune into everybody. And once you're trying to tune into everybody, either you hit it or you don't. And if you don't, I mean, it just kind of sucks because you're just floundering for a while. Right. So that's my goal, is to try and get in that niche and stay there for a while.
Wow, that's awesome. So I know we touched on this a little bit, but before we go, when is your next event, and when can people see you next, I guess?
The next event will be the next major one, at least, because I've got some local spots, but I don't think they're anything of note worth that I would put out there, except for February 25th. If you're in the Valley, I believe it's far. It'll be Combat Cult Wrestling. Let me double check this.
Okay, sure. I've
got way too many promotions going on. Apologies.
No problem.
But yeah,
we'll plug you a little bit here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I believe it's called Combat Cult, but let me double check it. And that'll be February 25th in Far, Texas. Okay. And that's a ladder match between myself, Con Hawk, I believe Raxo from Laredo is in there, which he's been on a pretty cool, like, he just wrestled super crazy from like ECW from back in the day. And he's a good kid. So it's going to be a good match. And there's another local guy on that same card, if I can find it fast enough without taking too much of your time. But yeah, and that'll be the next big thing I got going on. And then Mat War Pro in March also will be here in the DFW. On I think it's on Panther Island. That it's Martin House Brewery is where I think it's where it's going to take place at. and that one it will be here in the DFW, locally to us.
Okay.
I can't. I know I shared it, and it's just not popping up. But and that in between time, I've got teas, and it is Combat Colt. It's Combat Colt, and it'll be based out of Far, Texas, on February 25th. Tickets are $10. Children under 10 will be $5.
Okay.
And doors open at 6. That's in Westclo, Texas, 709 Jalinta Drive, Suite C. And that will be in Westclo, Texas. The other one will be, that I mentioned, I think it's called The War in the Trinity, and it'll be for Matt War Pro. Look for Matt War Pro on Facebook, Instagram for upcoming events. Martin House Brewery, which is another local brewery, is a partner of theirs.
Okay.
I'm also partnered with Turning Point Brewery out of Bedford. So that's what we got going on. And my teas. My teas, I think, are the most, I guess, requested things I get. So if you guys ever need any of those Aven Axl Misfit tees, hit me up and I will get them to you. I will get them shipped to you, delivered to you if you're in DFW, or if you're in a city that I'm wrestling in, I'll get you one in your hands if you pay for it.
And we'll put any links to your social media in the description.
Oh, so fantastic.
That'd be awesome.
That sounds great.
Well, thank you so much. This was interesting as heck.
Yeah,
so,
I'm glad you dug it.
Best of luck, and I wish you all the success. So,
thank you
very much, Aven.
You as well.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thank
you, everybody out there.
El Borracho! El Borracho! El Borracho! El Borracho!